got someone who travels with his own fan club.
Feeling great! Feeling great! Feeling great! F-R-A-N-K!
Okay, you need to tell your people that this is not a WWE set, okay?
As Tony Kornheiser and Jose Mourinho would say, respect. Respect.
Yeah, Tony heard of it about a month ago. Welcome to PTI with Kornheiser too soft to finish the week. I'm joined by our great friend from The Athletic, fill-in Frank Isola. Again with these people, get out. Clear the studio.
Get my car ready.
I need some respect. We begin with the most bizarre of stories. Patriots owner Robert Kraft will be charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of solicitation in South Florida. Law enforcement officials say they even have video of Kraft to substantiate their charges. A spokesperson for Kraft says, quote, "We categorically deny that Mr. Kraft engaged in any illegal activity," close quote. Frank, other than embarrassment, what, if anything, do we expect to happen as it relates to Kraft and his ownership of the NFL's most successful franchise of late?
Good point. Embarrassing for everyone involved, the Kraft family, the NFL, obviously the Patriots as well. A couple of details. Secondary misdemeanor charges, each count punishable by up to 60 days in jail. He also faces the NFL's personal conduct policy, which there's a higher standard for owners and league personnel than there is for players. So remember Jim Irsay? He was misdemeanor count for driving while intoxicated. He got 6 games, $500,000. We don't know how this is going to play out. This is a very serious thing going on in Florida because this is a bigger investigation into sex trafficking.
To which he is a small part of, and not.
But we're told all the details are still.
That's right. We don't know what we're going to find out. We don't even know. I mean, when you talk about somebody being charged, we don't even know how that's going to play out. But totally embarrassing for the league, for Kraft himself, and you just wonder, are owners going to be up in arms and making demands? I mean, let's face it, guys of that age, many of them have their own issues that may be closeted, and I just mean behind closed doors when I use that word. So I don't know that anybody's going to be out there calling for a great punishment of Robert Kraft, Frank, until we know a great many of the details.
Well, let me ask you this. What about the league? And Roger Goodell, we know his relationship with Robert Kraft isn't that good, even though Robert Kraft been the most successful owner in the NFL the last 20 years. Could there be something where they tell him, you know what, maybe it's time for you to take a step back and now let your son be the face? Because he loves being the owner of the Patriots, Mike.
Yeah, he does. It's hard for me to imagine that, again, unless there are details that we are not privy to now. I mean, but if this is what we're looking at and it remains a misdemeanor, man, I find it hard to believe that the league is going to insist.
And it's interesting, we talk about Robert Kraft. We saw him at the Sixers-Laker game.
Yeah.
He had a presence at the All-Star.
Guy. He likes going to games and being front and center. Maybe a little less.
He's going to get some kind of suspension, though. That's definitely going to happen. Maybe as many as 6 to 8 games.
I don't know about that. Let's see this play out.
Irsay got 6. All right, on to the NBA. LeBron James, he wasn't lying when he said he's now been activated.
Love that word.
LeBron scored 16 of his 29 points in the second half as the Lakers overcame a 19-point deficit against the Houston Rockets. The Lakers are the very definition, Michael, of mediocre. They're 29-29. But to be fair, they're 1-0 with LeBron activated. Michael, did this performance convince you that the Lakers are going to get the very best LeBron James for the remainder of the season?
Well, for a while it didn't. The first quarter of that game, LeBron was doing his best Tom Brady. Scowling at people and frowning at people and blaming people. He's like, whoa, what is going on here? And then they got out of it. Whatever funk he and they were in, they pulled out of it. And it was a fabulous playoff-level game. And that's what I expect from the Lakers. From now on, just play. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear if they're together or what happened 2 weeks ago, what happened. Shut up. Play. You're good enough and your personnel is good enough to rise above 8th and rise above 7th in the NBA West if they concentrate and play like they did in the 3 quarters of the end of that game.
They started the day in 10th place, a game under 500. But they also started the day with LeBron James. And as long as you have him, when I look at the Clippers, and of course the Clippers are kind of punting the season a little bit because they traded Tobias Harris.
Don't doubt that.
It's going to.
They're still trying to win.
They still traded their best player, though.
Yeah.
And I think Sacramento is going to be a competitive team, even though they lost last night to the Warriors. LeBron James is going to make the playoffs, assuming he plays in at least 20 of the last 24 games. They have the fourth toughest schedule in the league. And besides LeBron, here's something. Brandon Ingram, 27 points,
well, that's what I was gonna get
13
to.
rebounds. That was
Brandon
big.
Ingram and Kyle Kuzma can play. I don't want to hear about what they don't have. They have those two young players who seem to be willing to take LeBron's scowls, learn from it, get better, play great deep into games. I'm tired of hearing about what the Lakers don't have. I like those two players. I think you do too.
Yes.
And Ingram, who seems
Not
to
the
be
Pelicans.
the most dismissed of those young Lakers players, and they get ball back, which will help with ball handling and help with depth.
Defensively.
I mean, come on now.
All right, so LeBron has made the playoffs 13 straight years.
Right.
The Lakers have missed it 5 straight years. Which one of those streaks
They're
is
going to
ending?
make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm not betting against.
Well,
I'm going
he's activated.
with LeBron.
We need you to be activated now.
My God. A tasty little sidebar from last night is the Rockets and their continued beef with veteran referee Scott Foster. James Harden and Chris Paul were both fouled out in L.A., and while neither complained specifically about calls afterward, both had harsh words for Foster. Harden called Foster rude and arrogant, and Paul mentioned that the Rockets and the league had already had this talk. Frank, this isn't the first time a team has had issues with a specific ref. But what do you make of all this?
You know what? I think they went a little overboard from this standpoint. Right before the second half of the season, you had a story from Brian Windhorst where opposing players and coaches are complaining that James Harden is getting every call, that he travels, that he commits a lot of offensive fouls. Remember something about this game. They were up by 19 points in the second half. If the game stopped right there and you interviewed James Harden and Chris Paul and said, what do you think about the officiating? You think they're going to trash the
complain about
officiating?
Scott Foster?
What they're mad about, the final 20 minutes, they did not attempt a single free throw.
Right.
And the Lakers attempted 17. There's also 2 other referees out there, though, to be fair. And plus, the Rockets are a 3-point shooting team. They're not a team that goes to the basket.
They're not always the aggressor. But there were a couple of calls last night that was straight up the right call. The charging call that I think was a 6th foul that LeBron took from Harden. It's a foul. Don't want to hear it.
Michael Smith called that one.
Michael Smith, not Scott Foster. Look, Scott could be a tough guy. We know this. And the Rockets aren't the only team with the complaint about Scott Foster. This is not new either. And so I understand the beef back and forth. They don't think they can talk to him, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. The Rockets blew a 19-point lead. It is the story. And they had Capella, and they had Chris Paul, and they were up in that game. So they got to really look at themselves. You know what? Do you realize they're only 2 games out of 8th, the Rockets? So the Rockets are not free and clear.
Here's the thing about the Rockets. Last year, Scott Foster officiated 2 of their games in the Western Conference Finals. They lost both of those games. James Harden, the last time he fouled out of a game, Scott Foster was the crew chief. So when he shows up for a game, it's already in their head.
So if you're the league, do you do anything? Do you make a move? Do you have an avoidance? What do you do if you're the league?
No, I don't. And in fact, I'll tell you what. If I'm the league, I would say this. Hey, Scott Foster, Michael Smith, and Courtney Kirkland, how come you didn't call a flagrant foul on Chris Paul when he yanked on LeBron's arm? And Chris Paul, I get it. He's friends with LeBron. That was a tough play. If I'm Luke Walton, I'm LeBron James, I'd be upset about that call. No call.
Passed over.
Yeah. All right, the NBA has sent a proposal to the Players Union to get rid of the one-and-done rule by the 2022 draft. What a crazy coincidence that the proposal was made public just one day after Zion Williamson's knee injury sparked a national debate about whether Zion should even be playing college basketball. But, Michael, here's the thing. Would Zion Williamson even be Zion Williamson without spending at least 1 season at Duke?
Yeah, he would. He would.
You sure about that?
He would. The other players in college basketball, no. I haven't seen anybody that I don't think benefited or is benefiting from college basketball. Teaching, coaching, maturing, evolving. And this is my problem. I don't want a rule that's going to sort of acknowledge 2 or 3 college basketball players a year. And I think it's short-sighted. I think it's potentially tragic for reasons that have to do with education. I get into debates and fights and beefs with guys all the time about this in and out of the NBA, whether they are sometimes just regular folk. But I have a problem with it. I know it's going to happen. But, yeah, would Zion be Zion? He would.
Let me ask you a hypothetical.
Okay.
He came out of high school, goes right to the NBA. Phoenix had the number 1 pick. They draft him first overall. Let's say, I'll give Phoenix more wins than they have now. They have 13 wins. He's this big of a story. He's one of the biggest names in sports right now in the United States.
Because of college.
Because he's playing college basketball. You think he'd be that big if he's playing for the Phoenix Suns?
But that's about the hype in social media and mainstream media. That's not about him.
But every game's on TV.
Okay, but that's still not about him. If he gets drafted by Phoenix this year, all their games going to be on national TV next year.
That's because he went to Duke for a year. Everybody knows him.
But you know what? It wouldn't take but about 5 games.
Do you think it hurts the NBA by getting rid of one and done from this reason?
Right.
Number one, you use college basketball not just for player development, but for marketing.
We know that, Frank. We know that. But how long would it take you to figure out that Doncic could play? Do you need a whole season in college? No. 5 games, we knew Doncic could play.
Remember,
we had never seen him.
Years ago when guys would stay in college for a long time? Like when Patrick Ewing came out, it felt like he had stayed in college for 6 years. Same thing with Grant Hill.
You know what they could all do? You know what those 2 guys mentioned you could do? They could play basketball at an elite level. These guys now, too many of them come in the league, and they cannot play at an elite level.
That's from a development standpoint, but everyone knew who they were because they were constantly playing these big college basketball games.
Benefits everybody except the kid.
Yeah.
And if they let him sell his jersey, maybe we wouldn't feel so bad and there wouldn't be so much angst about
his order. How about selling his own autograph?
Jersey, anything he wants. And that's where the NCAA is short-sighted. Not about having kids come to school or not. If you think I'm sick and tired of that topic, I'm really sick and tired of the Steelers and Antonio Brown. But, Frank, we got to deal with them again today because there are specific trade stories out there. GM Kevin Colbert told the NFL Network that 3 teams have inquired about a trade for the former All-Pro receiver. One specific report from Bill Barnwell of ESPN has the Steelers shipping Brown to the Cardinals for Josh Rosen and a mid-round draft pick, allowing the Cardinals to then draft Kyler Murray with the overall number 1. Frank, if you're the Cardinals, do you make that deal?
Well, one quick thing. Thank God that the NFL kind of has an NBA kind of slant to it. Trying to make like a team of this guy, Antonio Brown, with Larry Fitzgerald. Then you're drafting Kyler Murray.
And was he marketed or not, Kyler Murray?
Yeah, he was. He won the Heisman Trophy. A lot of people knew who he was by the end of the year. The thing about Kyler Murray, how tall is he? 2 weeks ago, he was 5'8".
7'8".
Now he's 5'10".
Okay. Well, he's young. He's still growing. I grew after I got to be 21. Why can't he? He ain't even 21.
Dwayne Haskins is 6'3".
I'm glad you mentioned Dwayne Haskins.
Over 4,000 yards. Who are you going to, if you have the number 1, if you do this deal for Antonio Brown, who are you taking?
Dwayne Haskins.
And that's not a knock on.
No, it's not a knock on Kyler Murray. Love him. But we know the situation with the new head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Haskins is getting overlooked in all this. Why? The other gentleman has been more greatly marketed, we would say, Kyler Murray, right? Yes. There's so much hype around him. And by the way, he has the tools to be a great professional football player. But Haskins, didn't he throw 50 touchdown passes in college?
Outstanding.
To like 8 interceptions? I mean, I saw this kid up close and personal at least once, I think twice. He's a great
If he
college
survives
player.
to 6, there's a good chance the Giants could take him. I'm going to talk about Haskins. By the way, Cliff Kingsbury had said about Murray, this is before he became the coach of Arizona. Kyler is a freak. I would take him with the first pick of the draft if I could.
He did say that.
Guess what? You can do that.
If you can put him on a field with a Hall of Fame receiver, Mr. Larry Fitzgerald, and Antonio Brown, any quarterback, how good a start would that facilitate?
And more than ever, the NFL, especially for these young coaches, is a win-now league. I would make the trade if I were Arizona.
What happened to sitting quarterbacks 2-3 years? Let's take a break. Coming up, how seriously should we take the Warriors' praise of the Sacramento Kings?
And how big of a deal was the Bucks win over the Boston Celtics last night at Fiserv Forum, not the Fiserv Forum.
There were 3 great games on TV last night.
Pardon, the interruption is brought to you by Jaguar, the art of performance.